Today, we're going to talk about something that has changed my daughter's life. Nutrition. What my daughter eats has a direct effect on her prognosis. Nutrition. Tell me about why it's important.
That is the most common thing that we do every single day. Every spoon that we take into our mouth, it could be either fighting a disease or feeding the disease.
What should people eat? We don't pay attention. Most of us, we don't have a cook in our house. It's going to be like, oh, we're going to fix everything for you. You just go, you buy whatever.
Most importantly, whenever we have any type of leaky gut or gut permeability, it means that your gut cells are no longer bind together as well.
What are the mechanisms in these foods that make them act as like opioids in certain people?
Basically the conversion or the metabolism, how you degrade casein. One of the pathways that you can degrade casein, you end up forming casomorphine.
Could you explain to me the sensibility of a food?
Firstly, the source. Secondly, how it interacts with us.
Talk to me about the famous baby formula that promises us great nutrition and 1,000 different vitamins. Why is it horrible?
The formula was intended to be like a very good balance of different type of protein, fats, and carbohydrate to resemble as much as the human breast milk. The thing is the type of ingredient that they choose.
So what's your last advice?
Test as much as possible. Everything that can be measured can be improved on.
Welcome to the Second Opinions podcast, where a second opinion could give you a second chance at a different prognosis. Today, we're going to talk about something that has changed my daughter's life. Nutrition. Now, nutrition isn't only for people with autism. It's for anybody who wants to live a healthier life. However, in my experience, nutrition, what my daughter eats, has a direct effect on her prognosis. And so, of course, everybody asks me, Miriam, what should my kid eat? What should we eat and how should we eat it? And for this, we're going to talk to Dr. Javier Garrido. We're going to be talking about a specific diet, or I guess we could say a way of eating called ret, rot, ret. In Spanish, it means retirar, rotar, retomar. I guess in English, it could be remove.
You rotate. And then you restore or reestablish.
Reestablish. Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. So I've done this podcast in Spanish with the diet inventor, which is the Dr. Dolly de Leon. She has, created this way of eating. She has patented this way of eating. And because she's a Spanish speaker, we've done, and let me tell you something, around good 40,000 people have seen that podcast. And just with the information that she gives in that podcast, which we're going to give now in English to you, there have been people who have wrote me like, my kid started speaking, or my kid started sleeping, or my kid is different, is paying attention. So I think that if you have a child with autism or with ADHD or anybody who wants to get their health better, you should listen to this podcast attentively. Its potential to change your life is pretty big. So let's just start with the beginning about not exactly what ret is, because we're going to get to that, but nutrition. Tell me about why it's important. Other than the cliches, like it's food.
No, but obviously, I think that is the most common thing that we do every single day. We eat at least 3 times a day. So every spoon that we take into our mouth, it could be either fighting a disease or feeding the disease.
Oh, okay.
So obviously, it does make an impact, and from the food and the nutrients it brings into the body, that is the raw material from which your body will produce every single cell. So obviously, you're not going to have the same quality of cell full of snacks and fast food that if you go with whole foods. Mm-hmm. So that is something very, very important to understand. Like
code. Remember Dr. E with the PhD said, food is code. And so if you want to put the code into your computer of hamburger and chicken nuggets and French fries versus whole, natural, delicious apple with
nutrient dense, antioxidants, and all of this.
Right.
And the other thing that we need to take into consideration are all of the additives that exist in foods, from pesticides, from this type of forever chemicals, dyes. So these are type of substances that your body does not know how to process. So it ends up causing even more inflammation, toxicity, and more trouble to your body.
Well, who determines what food is? Because if I grab a bag of red-looking chips and I read the bag, there's 40 ingredients, and the last 15, it's bicarbo, you know what I mean? It's this
entire chemical.
I don't even know how to pronounce it. I definitely don't know what it is. So why is it even legal for people to eat that crap?
supposed to have safety studies. They're supposed to, be safe and for human consumption. But the more ingredients a product has, and the more difficult it is to pronounce, we should likely not take that.
Yeah.
And the list of ingredients is something very important that we can all base on, because it lists something very important to understand. That it lists in priority.
Right. So if it says sugar first,
if it's sugar first, that is the most amount of grams or weight of
in
that
the whole
ingredient
bag.
in the whole bag. Whole bag, correct?
How many things do we not eat that begin with corn syrup? But here's I'm going to challenge something. So you said, yeah, these things have safety studies, but look at red dyes. Yes, there are safety studies. People have been eating it, but how many other studies have been done that these dyes cause ADHD? How long does it take for food to get approved and then to be rebunked and say, no, wait, we can't actually eat this?
Claro.
Years.
Years, because there's a very huge driver to make more food more palatable and more, easily marketable, to sell more foods, and to make them highly addictive. So there's a huge drive and force, moving that forward. And the thing is, who's fighting that? And all of the different information that we lack, at least back then.
I think that life going so fast as well, like with social media and how fast we need to go, like we don't pay attention. Most of us, like we don't have a cook in our house who's going to be like, oh, we're going to fix everything for you. Like you just go, you buy whatever is frozen. Like I lived off of TV dinners my whole life. It's probably why I have an autistic child to begin with, because my microbiome was shot, right? But okay, so I want to talk about, if we had a magic wand, what should people eat? Okay. And I know that the answer is different from everybody, because that's another thing. In the autism community, and I know you've heard this, many people claim that gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free diets are that's where it's at, right? And I've been one of those people. But within the 5,000, 6,000 patients that we have seen here in Panama, that diet by itself, it isn't enough for just everybody.
It's not enough, correct.
And it's not the right diet for everybody. I understand why, and I want you to explain why, generally speaking, gluten, dairy, and sugar are not the top choices for anybody who has inflammation. Mm-hmm. But I also want you to explain why some people don't get any benefit from just taking those three things out.
Okay. So there's, a lot of things that we can start with. Most importantly, whenever we have any type of leaky gut or gut permeability, it means that your gut cells are no longer bind together as well. So now you have some leakage of these type of antigens or allergens that are inside of your intestines that can go through the
pores. Through
the little holes, and they go into the bloodstream. So these are allergens or antigens like gluten that will have an even, a lot higher inflammatory response whenever they go into the bloodstream. So that's why for overall patients that are having type of abdominal symptoms or suspicious of leaky gut or proven leaky gut, we should avoid this. What type of foods should we take? Now we separate things into two different things: the source of the foods and how it interacts with us.
Okay.
So now that we're talking about the source, we have talked in previous episodes about the NOVO foods classification system.
Right. From natural to ultra processed.
From natural to ultra processed. So NOVA 1, whole foods, not unprocessed. I'm going to go over again. So okay. The NOVA 1 is whole foods. Imagine an apple. NOVA 2, minimally processed. So imagine the apple being sliced in the box. NOVA 3, the applesauce. Slightly more processed, heat, some other ingredients, something like that. NOVA 4 would be like McDonald's apple pie. Yeah. It doesn't have anything to do with the first. It doesn't look nothing alike. The thing is, 73% of the foods in the supermarket are NOVA 4.
Yeah.
So based on that, on the source, we should always try to aim for NOVA 1 and NOVA 2.
Okay,
as much as we can.
So zero processed, natural, or minimal processed, like rice. Rice would be minimal processed, mm-hmm. right? Although it has a lot of pesticides, but okay. I'm going to go back to the leaky gut, because for my kid, she had leaky gut. And the way I found out, right, way before people could test for it, was because she would laugh out loud for no reason. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, she would just laugh. And I'm like, well, she's not, she doesn't seem to be looking at anything. And it took me a long time to understand that because of these foods that she was eating, that would not only go into the bloodstream through her leaky gut, it would reach her brain and touch morphine and dopamine receptors. And most parents who are listening to this are thinking, oh my God, that happens to my kid. And then I went a little further and I started to investigate a little more. And that, my daughter threw herself off a bed once and she broke her collarbone. She didn't even cry. I didn't even know. I knew that she hit herself hard, but I couldn't tell it was broken till the next day that she had like her arm like twisted in. Mm-hmm. And I went and got an x-ray and it was broken. She didn't even cry. So I'm like, well, how can you not cry? You have a broken bone. Well, because she was so doped up on that morphine, like, how can these foods act as opioids? Because we're talking about dairy, the casein in dairy, the sugar, and the gluten specifically. What are the mechanisms in these foods that make them act as like opioids in certain people?
So basically the conversion or the metabolism, how you degrade casein. One of the pathways that you can degrade casein, you end up forming casomorphine, which is highly addictive and can cause you this type of symptoms or behavior in patients with autism.
Well, I think that if any kid's laughing around for no reason and doesn't feel pain, or even the kids who love the swimming pool, I read this actually in a book from an autistic person saying, I don't feel my body the same way I think you feel yours. So when I'm outside of the water, it's almost like, it's like flaky. And when I go inside the water, the resistance makes me feel myself. And Raquel could be in the freaking pool 8 hours. Mm-hmm. She was comfortable there. And when we started fixing her leaky gut, she didn't want to go to the pool anymore. She didn't need it anymore. And I was like, oh, didn't you love the pool? Mm-hmm. No, not really. She just loved how she felt in it. And so I think food's important. Before we get into what this diet means, why? Sorry, I know you're the doctor and I'm always attacking my doctors. Why? The 9 out of 10 freaking doctors say that nutrition is not important in autism or in anything, really.
In most conditions. And I think we have seen a trend, awareness or consciousness in the importance of nutrition lately. I think the main consideration is that we are not taught enough about nutrition during med school, during our formation, or its relation or impact in the different type of diseases that we can have. I've told you already, we have 1 semester of nutrition, 1 semester only, and that semester is mainly to calculate, how many calories, how many grams of proteins, things like that. Very basic. It does not go deep into the, all of the nutrigenomics and how the food can affect each and one of those and the condition itself. So that's number 1. Number 2, the last semester that we have, at least here in Panama, is therapeutics. So therapeutics is, you have diabetes, you take metformin. You have high blood pressure, you take this. You have high cholesterol, you take that. So the last subject for us here in Panama, or at least in the last semester, therapeutics. That is the one that teaches us that there's a pill for every ill. So that is in your mindset. That is already, encoded.
You have diarrhea? Imodium. Mm-hmm. We don't have to figure out why you have diarrhea.
Exactly.
Or if you're constipated,
take this.
Right. We don't have to take Miralax or whatever. We don't have to ask why you're constipated. But usually it's intolerances. So I do want to, before we start the diet, I do want to talk about the 4 things that, at least I've identified this with my own daughter, and then you can add on to whatever else you think. With my daughter and our autistic patients here, there's 4 things we usually look at, right? It's 1, the allergies. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you give your child an apple and your child gets a rash or, the throat, they can't breathe, they're allergic. Your kid can't eat that for now. 2, intolerances. If your child gets constipation from the apple or gets diarrhea or gets acid reflux, which many people can't identify what that is, but usually is the kid who's always like biting on something, trying to salivate, or eating crunchy foods, or just drinking really cold water, or they have their belly distended and they want to like press it against the furniture. That's intolerance, okay? Behavior. Sometimes I would give Raquel something and none of these things showed up, but she would start running around like crazy, flapping her arms, running around in circles. I had no idea why. It had to do with the food intake. And lastly, it's a food sensibility, and that has to do with the immune system. And that's a little bit harder for me to explain. Could you explain to me the sensibility of a food?
Perfect. So this is what I was talking about. No, we had the source of the food. Which type of food do we need to eat? We need to identify, firstly, the source. Secondly, how it interacts with us. And as you mentioned, 3 main things and the behavior. Food allergy gives you a histamine-mediated reaction, which could give you hives, could give you the eye swell, the throat,
rashes,
everything. So that's pretty quick, pretty fast. Secondly, you have the intolerance. Intolerance means that your body's not able to degrade or metabolize that certain type of foods, like lactose intolerance.
Yeah. They're running to the bathroom.
They run almost immediately to the bathroom. They have bloating, they could have nausea and explosive diarrhea. So your body it's not able to metabolize or digest
That was
product.
funny, like explosive diarrhea, like it's horrible, but it's true.
But usually allergies and intolerance, you're able to identify what it is that's causing the problem.
You should, but not so much in autism, in my experience.
But at least with sensitivities, it's much harder. Because sensitivities, we measure a protein called immunoglobulin G. And that usually starts to increase 8 hours to 48 hours after the ingestion of the food. So if I eat, let's say, I'm sensitive to eggs. If I eat eggs for breakfast today, probably by night, I could be bloated, or by tomorrow morning.
It's not immediate.
It's not immediate. So it's very difficult to pinpoint what it is that is affecting you. So by understanding this and seeing the behavior changes that we see in patients, and the behavior has been tested and proven in different clinical trials that if you switch the diets to an anti-inflammatory diet or a whole food based diet, or just avoiding highly processed foods, you reduce symptoms of ADHD in 87% of the patients.
Yeah, it's huge. I just saw that published. That, I think that sensibilities are very hard. Also because it's when the immune system literally doesn't recognize the food you just ate. And so it will show up in bloating and things like that. But what I've seen in our patients here is that it doesn't show up in something somebody can see, but their blood tests, like the EGG you just talked about, just goes really, really high. And the inflammation inside, it does affect every organ, and that does affect prognosis. Like there's kids who have very high allergies and high sensibilities that can't talk, for example, because of what's happening. At least that's what Dr. Doli has found. Somebody with an IgE over 2,000 is nonverbal. So it's like all these things do have a correlation with the person's prognosis. And with intolerances, a lot of autistic kids love to eat the same thing every day. They're not the most variety type of eaters. And so they're only getting the same thing all over again. And if they're allergic, sensitive, or intolerant to that food, mom and dad can't tell what the difference is.
It's going to be a constant attack on your gut and a constant attack on your immune system. And with autism, it's especially important to understand that there is a dysregulation of your immune system. That immune system is overreactive. So it's basically having an exaggerated response in different type of immune proteins or inflammatory proteins. So any further stimulation is detrimental for the patient.
Yeah, and foods can stimulate that, for better or for worse. So we have to, first of all, understand the importance of nutrition in autism, because that's what we're talking. But what other conditions should we talk about as well? Like that would be included in everything we're saying right now.
Most importantly, in every single inflammatory or autoimmune related condition.
Okay. Crohn's disease,
MS, rheumatoid arthritis,
Parkinson's,
even wear and tear. Even the normal wear and tear, osteoarthritis, can also be impacted by the overall systemic condition.
Oh, how about depression, anxiety?
As well.
So everybody, because I think everybody's something out of everything we just said.
But you do see huge impacts very rapidly whenever you change the diet in patients with autism and patients with inflammatory or autoimmune conditions. You see, you feel, and you can see the biomarkers going down.
Right, and then their prognosis goes up. That's the truth. So before you explain to us what this diet is, there's this one example I love to give, because I feel like people, when we think of food, we think of nutrition, we think of calories, we think of vitamins, but we do not think of bacteria. And so here's something that Dr. Doli told me, and I've always, every time I tell somebody this, they're like, oh. So let's say we have two types of foods, dead food and food that are alive. So in this hand, I have a can of mushrooms. And on this hand, I have live mushrooms, fresh mushrooms. These, after 3 days, you got to throw them out, right? Because they go rotten. But what happened to them? They died, right? Because any food that is alive and fresh has microbiome. What are autistic kids missing? Bacteria for microbiome. So when you put these mushrooms, these fresh mushrooms, into any kind of processed, thing like a can, I don't know, a cardboard box, whatever. You're retaining some of the nutrition, but you're killing off the bacteria that we so much need right now. Right? Kids, at least, they need it. So what's really cool about nature is that if you have 3 apples, a red, a green, and a yellow, all 3 of them are apples, but because they're different species, they have different bacteria. So I think that people should keep the bacteria part in mind when we speak about this diet that's coming up, because it's not just a nutrition-based diet.
Exactly, and it's not meant to only nurture yourself. It's also meant to nurture your gut biome,
your bugs. Yeah, and the 8 weeks of this diet will really, really reset your microbiome. I believe it's not a diet that's meant to be forever. So that's something Dr. Doli has always said. She's always said, listen, if I had my choice and my patient could take it, I would give him a plate full of 50 or 100 delicious, beautiful colors and flavors from nature. But you give an autistic person that much variety, and they cannot process it, even though it's from nature. And so this diet has been developed for people who do not have a diverse microbiome, who have a lot of inflammation. And that's why we're going to go slow with this diet. It isn't something that, that is meant to be forever. So go through it with me a little bit. What is this diet? How does it work?
So the goal of this diet is basically to reduce the inflammatory burden on the body. So it's basically removing everything that we already know by the studies and the personalized studies, genetics, stool sample, gut biome, every single study. And based on what you do not need or something is hurting you, we start removing all of this.
Right. Now, there's a lot of people who are going to see this podcast that aren't going to come here to do all this testing. So I guess we could add that remove the known things.
The known things.
Like gluten, dairy, processed foods, ultra processed.
In general. Over here, we can go a little bit more selective and personalized to understand your IgE, immunoglobulin E, which is the allergic reaction. IgG, which is basically the sensitivity. We can measure the intolerance and your gut biome diversity to understand what type of nutrients or what type of foods we need to nurture that specific population of bacteria.
Yeah, that would be ideal. But if you're listening to this and you can't just come rushing over, which I hope you would, but if you can't, okay, all ultra-processed foods and things that your child can't eat, because the second you give them to them, they get horrible reactions.
Claro. And then the other part is, let's go slow with the products or the ingredients.
Okay.
So ideally, 3 to 5 ingredients per day. The same ingredients in that day. That's it. So with this, we're basically giving a very small burden on the body, and we're able to understand in another way how that patient reacts to these type of foods. So it's going to be the same ingredients for breakfast, the same ingredients for lunch, and the same ingredients for dinner.
And for snacks.
And this is for the remove. Now, if we go for the
but
rotation,
let's stop there real quick. Let's elaborate a little bit, because this can get confusing. So what the doctors recommend usually is 5 ingredients. It would be 1 protein, 1 carb, 1 to 2 vegetables, and a fruit. The 6th ingredient is the oil in which you cook things in, because even oil should be rotated. We'll explain why. So let's say Monday, you're going to give your child, let's say, chicken, rice, mushrooms, lettuce, and banana. And you're going to make it with olive oil. That is all the person gets all Monday. Now, you can do, for example, French fries for breakfast, whatever, in an air fryer with a ground chicken patty, just to give you an example. And then for lunch, you do chicken cutlets with boiled potatoes. And then for nighttime, you could do mashed potatoes with chicken barbecue. We don't care how you cook it. Just make sure that every day you're doing 1 protein, 1 carbohydrate, 1 to 2 vegetables, 1 fruit, and 1 oil. Now, here's the kicker. The rotation part. Mm-hmm. So go ahead and talk to us about rotation.
So with the rotation part, it's basically the next day, we don't want to repeat
what we ate on Monday.
What we ate on the Monday.
Minimum, I think 3 or 4 days.
See, ideally more. The good thing about this, it's a couple of things. You lower the burden on your gut and your immune system. The other part, that rotation also that variety of different type of foods will slowly continue nurturing your gut biome and nurturing that type of bacteria.
It forces you.
It does. The thing is, as you mentioned before, if I put 50 different type of ingredients in a single plate and I eat the entire plate, my bugs are not ready to eat that. Or I don't have the certain variety of certain group of bacteria that eats fiber, or certain group of bacteria that eats another processed, proteins. So that could affect your digestion, that could affect your mood, and that could affect in any type of inflammatory response. So with this rotation, we're basically reducing the burden of the immune system on your gut and improving and stabilizing your gut biome.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool when I started with this diet with Raquel, because Raquel, up till like maybe a couple years ago, she's been gluten-free, dairy-free, and sugar-free since she was 2. So I've been doing this for 15 years. But she changed so much when we started Red, because, they sell a lot of things in the market, right? Gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free. But when you look at the ingredients, they're all processed. So we can't fool ourselves into thinking that cookie, because it's gluten-free and dairy-free, our kids can have it. They can't digest it. And if you can't digest it, that causes inflammation, and that causes more problems in the long run and the short run too. So what I found with my kid is giving her the same thing every day, like not every day, all day. For example, the chicken and potato all day Monday. And I couldn't rotate more than 4 days because Raquel wouldn't accept that many foods. But for example, I would give her Monday, chicken and potatoes, and the next day meat and rice, and the next day fish and plantains, and the next day I would give her turkey and yuca, which I'm not sure in the United States if they have yuca. But the thing is, you take all your child eats and you rotate it. And what's really cool about it is there were certain things that Raquel was sensitive to that I didn't know she was sensitive, because I didn't have the studies just yet. And so out of those 5 ingredients I gave her on Monday, at least you're not giving her the same things on Tuesday. So let's say out of the 5 ingredients you give your child on Monday, he's allergic, sensitive, or intolerant to 1. And you still don't know which one that is. At least next day, you're not giving her you're not going to give them that same thing. And the next day, you're not going to give them from the day before. So the rotation helps, I think, 3 things. Like in my kid, the first thing was lower inflammation. Of course, it's like if I'm only giving microbiome a 5 bacteria job all day, it gets relaxed, which in turn relaxes my immune system and it makes my inflammation down, right? That's the second thing. The third thing, I could tell pretty quickly by repeating this diet, because that's what you do, right? You do the whole week, you try to rotate as much as you can, but you write it down. I could tell that every Tuesday that she had fried plantains, maduros, the yellow ones, she would have a lot of stereotypes. She would like do this thing with her mouth. She's like, ee, ee, every Tuesday. And I noticed after a month journal that that behavior would repeat itself every time she would eat those 5 ingredients. And so then I took good days. Oh, well, Monday's always been a good day. And I started to take out the carb from Monday and put the Tuesday. And that's when I realized, it was a plantain. So, okay, if we lower to 5 ingredients plus oil, if we rotate, you ideally want to rotate every single day. However, a lot of people are thinking, what? I can't even get my kid to eat protein. Like, what would you tell all these parents who are saying, my kid's picky? Why are the kids picky, and what hope are there for those kids?
Of course. So there's a lot of data that suggests or correlates certain type of overgrowth or certain type of bacteria or microorganism like bug, like Candida, for example, that does trigger that hyperselectivity, that they're very, very selective in what they eat. So ideally, with this type of rotation diet, you do improve these symptoms. We have had a lot of patients and concerns like, my baby's not going to eat anything else unless I give them this.
Yeah, their yogurt or their sugar or their bread.
Or their cookie or their, the chicken nuggets with the French fries. That's all they eat, or pizza. So we have found there's a couple of things. One way would be basically giving them with either, with spoons or syringe.
Like a little soup.
And the other way would be continue offering the food until the patient accepts the foods. As a parent, there's a lot of concern like, no, he's going to starve. He's not going to starve. He's not going to starve. It could take 1 day, it could take 2 days. As long as he's very well hydrated, there's no risk involved. Obviously, it's a very sensitive sensitive topic, because as a parent and as a doctor, you don't want a patient to go too long without any type of foods. But it will eventually accept the type of foods that you're offering, and everything will get better from there.
There's a reason for that, though. I mean, at least we've been doing this protocol for a while now, and the things I've seen, right, are kids who I've never seen a kid in the past 10 years, and we've had at least 5,000 patients, start this diet and not do it eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So the first couple of days are hell for a lot of these kids, right? The picky eaters, they have a lot of inflammation that they have to go through. And they're addicted. And so if I'm addicted to yogurt or to formulas or to chicken nuggets, it's going to be a good 3 to 5 days of abstinence syndrome, withdrawal syndrome. And those are really scary for parents. So I would always caution parents to get help to do this. You don't have to do it alone, you know? For sure, you know, we could obviously put some kind of expert to help you, but it does take a couple of days for the kid to the inflammation to drop and the withdrawal symptoms to go away. But it's worth it. Mm-hmm. I think it's worth it because it changes the whole prognosis of your child. Your child is addicted. Like most parents' intuition is on point. No, if my kid doesn't eat that, he's going to starve. They're right in the sense that kid's addicted, but they're wrong in the thinking that the kid won't be able to overcome it. So I've found for a parent, my own mental state determines their mental ceiling. That's for sure. If I think my kid's never going to eat anything, if I think this is all he eats, that's all he'll ever eat. But it does have a repercussion in their prognosis. It just does. And people think, well, my kid's not so bad right now. How does autism evolve in time if you've done nothing?
It doesn't. It doesn't evolve. O sea,
for better, no, but for worse, it could.
For worse, it could. Because if you continue having we already said there's an immune dysregulation in autism. So basically an exaggerated inflammatory response that does two things in your brain. Something called synaptic pruning. Synapsis is the connection between one neuron and another neuron. And pruning is basically cutting off those connections.
Yeah.
So the more ongoing inflammation you have, the more synaptic pruning there's going to be. The other part is that high amount of inflammatory proteins in your brain would also trigger neuronal death. Basically, you're going to start losing neurons. So all of this, translates into altered neurodevelopment and
a less functioning person
and altered behavior. So obviously, the more we continue eating this way, or the more we don't, do anything to try to fix this, the worse the prognosis.
Yeah. I had a parent who from the States, and I was lucky enough to be in the consult with Dr. Leon, and the kid ate chicken nuggets, French fries, and pizza. Okay. And the mom was closed. She's like, there's no way my kid's going to eat anything but this. He's been eating this for 8 years. It's just never going to happen. Ever, ever, ever. And the doctor could tell this one was very close to the idea. But we can't advance with the ABC protocol or with anything until this child's eating correctly or accepting more foods. So I thought this was very interesting. So Dr. De Leon said, okay, here's what we're going to do. He eats these 3 foods, right? Chicken nuggets, French fries, and pizza. We are going to rotate those. So Monday, all day pizza. Tuesday, all day chicken nuggets. Wednesday, all day whatever, the French fries or whatever. And I'm sitting there looking at her like, are you crazy? And she's like, I have a feeling that by just rotating even the poison, the kid will get less inflamed. Because for better or for worse, it's less
burden.
Less burden. You know what? By day 5, the kid started eating other things. Within the month, the doctor had the kid on the diet. And I thought, wow, okay, so many ingredients go into this kid's bodies, they cannot digest it. And people don't think the kid can get better. But the moment we understand that they are picky because something's happening, because they're inflamed, because they're in pain, because they have food sensibilities, and we fix that, they start to eat. But we are used to being told that our kid doesn't want to eat anything because it's
autism.
It's autism, or that they have sensory issues. Like it's a sensory problem. Take him to therapy. I took Raquel to therapy for 6 years for her to drink water, and she didn't. We had to identify with a medical team why she didn't want water. And once we found that out, we saw the inflammation, Raquel started to accept water. But Raquel didn't accept new foods until she was like 12. Like it was a huge thing because for her, it wasn't only inflammation. It was acid reflux caused by a dysbiosis, an intestinal dysbiosis. And that takes a lot longer to cure. So do a recap on this diet for me.
Okay, so we had first of all, remove everything that can trigger or cause more inflammation or does not belong in your body.
Like
Highly processed foods, different type of preservative, dyes, colorants, pesticides, all of that.
anything with the barcode. If God didn't make it, you don't eat it.
Exactly. Everything in a box. So that's on the first part. Remove everything that could trigger more inflammation. Rotate 3 to 5 products, those same ingredients for each day. And then the next day, other set of ingredients. The third day, other set of ingredients. And the fourth day, other set of ingredients. Then you can rinse, wash, and repeat. You can start again from day 1, day 2, day 3. And ideally to keep a journal. That journaling can help me understand the behavior of my kid and the type of foods that he had that day.
Yeah.
The third step, restore. Then we need to restore all of the good stuff that the patient is missing.
Right, because here's what happens. So ideally, for the microbiome, if I had a green smoothie with 50 delicious leaves, an autistic kid couldn't take it. Or anybody with less diversity. So obviously what we want to eventually be able to do is give them variety. Not just keep them with 5 foods a day.
Exactly.
Yeah, because the thing is, with this diet, what's really cool is that you're rotating. So you're actually introducing 5 new bacteria per day that your kid probably doesn't have. So eventually you want to introduce 10 bacteria per day, 15 bacteria per day. It took my daughter...
And that's an example. So it's not that you're introducing 5 bacteria or 15 bacteria, but everything that we eat is basically a prebiotic.
Yeah.
Prebiotic that is basically food as well for our bacteria. So our bacteria are different sets of bacteria and colonies of bacteria eat different type of foods, from protein, from fibers. But that's something very important to understand. We're not nurturing just ourselves. We're nurturing our gut biome with everything that we eat.
Right, but foods have my biome. So like, why does Candida, which is a fungus, make you want to eat sugar? Like our bugs tell us what to eat.
Candida thrives on sugar.
Yeah,
that's the
parasites you too. So we have to be careful with what we feed. You know, and here's the thing. Let's talk portions. Because somebody's going to say, okay, fine. I'll do this red diet. I'll give my kid these 5 ingredients. Plus, remember, very important. The oil has to be changed. So what oils should I use? There are oils you should not use. Vegetable oils are no. Canola oils are no. Sunflower oils are hell no. Okay? What do we need? So avocado is good. Coconut, depending on your kid, by the way. Avocado oil could be great for me and it can make you sick, right? But let's say like the healthier options, avocado, coconut, olive oil, and I think like the fats from the, like I know lard, right? But I know like, for example, Dr. De Leon, what she loves to do is if you're going to cook meat, she loves to cook it in the meat grease. If you're going to do pork grease, like that. Chicken fat. And that's that lowers the charge. Okay. So what was I getting at? Because I got distracted. The oils are so important. You know, if you mess up the oils, portions. Okay. So if I'm allowed to have one type of carb a day, 1 type of protein, 1 to 2 vegetables, and a fruit, what are the portions that somebody should have? Because there's kids who have like 8 bananas.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
Like somebody's like, I'm doing that perfectly. And you see the kid, and the kid's like, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, but how many bananas are you giving him? 8. I'm like, would you eat 8 bananas?
No. And this was an actual case.
Yeah.
So this was an actual patient. I remember the patient. Exactly. No. So ideally, it's to have, balance. And that is the important part of this diet is returning the balance or the homeostasis in the body. So obviously, if I want to start introducing or reintroducing different type of foods or ingredients, I don't want to overload at the same time. Like, hey, have just a bunch of banana. Take 1 banana. Take one vegetable, take 1 protein, hey, little by little.
Right. The way I've seen the doctor do it, it's like, so there's like a circle, right? And she does this 3 thing. So 1 portion like that of protein, 1 of vegetables, and the ones with the carbs, it's carbs and fruits, because the carbs and the fruits are the ones that tend, to disparar. How do you say, like to get them a little crazy, get the bugs crazy. I think it's trial and error until you get one of our experts to really teach you exactly. Because obviously you're not a nutritionist. I'm not a nutritionist. Our nutritionist is the one who tells you weigh the food and here's how much you should have. But for the podcast's sake, let's just try to use common sense. Okay? If your 3-year-old daughter is eating more than your husband, there's a problem. If your son is eating 10 oranges and you wouldn't eat 10 oranges, there's a problem. There's a problem. So we have to get them back to health. Now, one of the main concerns I've always heard about patients is But my kid just doesn't want to stop eating. Doesn't want to stop. They have no filter. My daughter's one of those kids. But for me, and I don't know if you have a different explanation, but in my own case, and in some of the cases I've been working on lately is, believe it or not, has a lot to do with acid reflux and gastritis.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have this balance in their gut, causes these symptoms. They go freaking crazy and they constantly want to eat something to to stop this feeling.
Claro. And it's something that even happens to adults. Adults, whenever you have gastritis or acid reflux, you have this type of acidity or this type of feeling in your stomach that feels exactly the same that when you're hungry.
Right.
So basically it tells your brain, like, hey, I'm feeling this way because I'm hungry. So you're always looking for different type of foods to calm this feeling or this sensation. So this even happened to grown-ups, not necessarily kids or patients with autism.
Right, but because they're autistic, Logos, that's just because he's autistic.
Mm-hmm.
No, he's in pain, dude. Like he's inflamed. Something's going on. And so we urge you, if your child's doing any of these things, this is not because of autism. It isn't. It's because something's wrong. He's either intolerant, he's either sensitive, he's probably allergic, he has inflammation, he's addicted. I had this one boy, I'll never forget. He wanted to come to the protocol. He was drinking 8 bottles of formula a freaking day, and he was 8 years old. Okay, please talk to me about the famous baby formula that promises us great nutrition and 1,000 different vitamins. Why is it horrible?
So I think you just need to check the list of ingredients. The formula was intended to be like a very good balance of different type of protein, fats, and carbohydrates to resemble as much as the human breast milk. The thing is the type of ingredient that they choose. If you look into the list of ingredients, obviously one of the main ingredients is going to be high fructose corn syrup. The main problem with high fructose corn syrup is that it does create a temporary leaky gut. Temporary leaky gut. So it's not a permanent damage. The thing is, if you are constantly eating things with high fructose corn syrup all throughout the day, every single day, you're going to have leaky gut, no matter what. So that's something very, very important to understand.
There are some of the formulas, like they're hydrolizada. How do you say it in English?
Hydrolyzed.
Those are better.
Those are better because they're basically partially digested, pieces of the protein.
Enzymes.
Yeah. So instead of having a very large piece of protein that your body now needs to work to cut into pieces in order to absorb them, now you can have this type of baby formula that are hydrolyzed, which is basically all cut up in different pieces.
Easier to digest.
It's a lot easier to digest.
Doesn't mean your kid's getting any nutrition from it, but at least he might not be as inflamed from it. Now, no 8-year-old needs the formula, but I think that there's something I wanted to say about the vitamins. Have you ever heard of that, of dormicum?
Mm-hmm.
So many kids, right, they have to go to get how do you say it? Some kind of dentist procedure. The dentist, if these kids are small kids, whether they're autistic or not, they can't just take a tooth out without sleeping the kid. So they always give them dormicum. It's something to make them sleep, right? And my daughter took that crap and it was the opposite effect. It was like as if you would have given her cocaine. Like, I swear. Like, it was crazy. She took dormicum to sleep. She was all over the place. Many years later, I understood that whenever you take any kind of medication, supplement, anything by mouth, whether it's food, medicine, or supplements, if you don't have the microbiome to break it up, digest it, and methylate it, and activate it, it could actually do the opposite effect. And that's why many kids who take different medications, the medication isn't effective, doesn't work, or gives them very bad side effects. When it comes to nutrition, when you see those labels like, 100% vitamin C, 100% vitamin B, blah, 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 if your child is within the spectrum, they're most likely not getting the benefit. But not only are they not getting the benefit from all of those digestive markers like the vitamins, they're getting inflamed, because if your kid cannot digest it, it will make him sick. It will inflame him. And the way we can tell is because they have more symptoms. Oh, my kid's still not talking. My kid's still not understanding. My kid's still not looking me in the eye. Right. They're getting inflamed every day by what they eat. And what we think is we're doing them a favor. We're giving them something that has lots of vitamins.
Of course.
But we're not.
And we have talked a lot about inflammation and inflamed. And I think it's very important to understand why is inflammation so bad.
Yeah.
So
Why is it so bad?
inflammation in a normal state is usually the first step or the first phase of the healing process. The thing is, whenever you have chronic inflammation, that is when the problem comes in. Whenever or wherever you have inflammation, you have 5 main things. And I always give the example. Imagine I fall down and I hurt my knee. My knee is going to be inflamed. It's going to have inflammation. It's going to have 5 things. It's going to be painful. It's going to be red. It's going to be warm. It's going to be swollen. And the 5th pillar of inflammation is loss of function. Loss of function. I won't be able to fully extend my knee or fully contract my knee. And if I walk, I'm going to be limping.
Yeah.
So whenever we talk about inflammation in patients with autism, we see inflammation in your gut. Loss of function in your gut. What does that give us? A reduced capacity of absorbing our nutrients or digesting our foods. Inflammation in our immune system. So obviously, there's going to be a loss of function in our immune system. Most of these kids, they either don't get sick or they get sick too much.
Yeah.
And there's going to be inflammation in your brain. So loss of function in your brain, we mentioned. Altered neurodevelopment and altered behavior.
And Raquel, she didn't get a fever for like 10 years. And I thought my kid had the best immune system until we started to get her healthy. And then she would get, like her sister would get sick and she would get her boogies too and a little fever too. The way the body should. The way the body is designed to attack different pathogens to get you healthy. But sometimes I see a lot of kids who are like, oh, my kid's super healthy. He never gets a fever. Or parents tell me, oh, my kid's in the hospital every month with ear infection. Not one or the other are normal. Mm-hmm. Why do we think it's normal? Because they're autistic. We have to stop. We have to stop with that because there's real problems happening. And one of the things that infuriates me is when somebody hears a podcast of ours and all of a sudden goes to the doctor and say, hey, we got to do something with my kid's nutrition. I heard about this gluten-free, dairy-free. And the doctor says, oh, there's not enough evidence. What would you say to that doctor? Because I know that there is enough evidence.
There's something important to understand or that we need to play. There's a lot of ego in every single professional because whenever you have someone question your authority or question your knowledge, you're going to bring all of your mechanisms of defense, all of your defense mechanisms. So it is also very important as a patient to see how you're able to do the approach. Usually questions like, is there anything else that we might be missing? Or what else can we do? What else can you recommend? That usually helps the professional open up as well and probably see what other solutions or try to think outside of
the box.
The box.
Yeah.
But yes, there's plenty of evidence, published evidence. And what most scientists love is randomized human controlled trials. Basically, the highest level of evidence, having a type of different clinical trials, randomized with placebo and control in the experimental group, and that have shown positive results.
Yeah. So I would say to anybody, look for those studies and maybe just have them in your consult and say, hey, look at this study. How interesting is this study? Because you can't actually help your medical professional read and understand it. I don't need that. I know it's true because I've already lived it. Once as a parent, you change your child's diet and they change for the better, nobody's going to tell you it's not true. No one. I remember one day Raquel came home from school and she's spitting in circles. She hadn't done that in a really long time. I'm like, what the hell is this? So I called the school and I said, what did you give my kid? Oh, I gave her cookies. I'm like, what cookies? I don't give my kid cookies. Yes, you do. Look, here they are. And they sent me a picture of a red box. It said gluten-free and it had Raquel's name on it. And I said, I have a question for you. Is there another Raquel in Raquel's class that is celiac? Oh, yeah, there is. I'm like, okay. My daughter doesn't need processed. My daughter doesn't need anything from red box. And those cookies may not have gluten, but they have dairy and they have sugar. And now look at my kid. My kid's banging her head and going crazy. And so I've lived it in my own skin. I think that for people who may have tried just a regular gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free diet, but are still giving their kids these processed things or have not investigated deeply, like what foods actually help or hurt my child, they might not see much difference because they're not doing it personalized. So I think that my advice would be do the diet as personalized as you can, if you can with a professional. If you can't, rewind this podcast, listen to it 10 times, try to do it with a journal in hand. lower the inflammation for your child by lowering the variety, and see for yourself what is good or not. So what's your last advice to close this podcast?
Test as much as possible. Everything that can be measured can be improved on. So in this age of medicine, we're thriving towards precision medicine. Mm-hmm. It's not a cookie cutter model for everybody. So we need to personalize the treatment specifically for you. The diet that works for me does not work for you. So there are different roles or different things that play into this, into this game. From nutrigenomics, based on your DNA, what type of foods or supplements you need based on your DNA, based on your immune system, based on your IgE, immunoglobulin G, intolerances. So with all of this and your gut biome diversity, if those can be measured, you already have the perfect baseline for building and designing a meal plan to aim to reduce inflammation,
which will definitely change your child's prognosis. And if you can't come here, you don't have a professional that can help you, at least do trial and error with natural foods. I mean, do whatever you can.
Trial and error is a good way. So if you don't want to do all the testings, the trial and error, it is a very good way. Cheap.
Right.
It doesn't cost you anything.
To try
and error. You just choose a certain amount of food or ingredients for that day, and you journal. That is your trial and error. Day 1, I had this symptom. Day 2, I didn't. Day 3, I did. So now you can understand of those 3 or 5 ingredients and start, trial and error.
Seeing which is good or bad.
Which one is good or bad.
Because most people, there are people who are going to come down here and get all those tests. But the truth is that not everybody could afford something like that. However, every time I'm like, diet, they're like, the diets are just too expensive. Yeah, when you go to Whole Foods and you buy $500 worth of cookies, because those are expensive, like gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, all these laboratory modified things are pricey as hell. But when we're just talking about just a natural, simple little apple, not the gluten-free, dairy-free super cookie with frosting apple, like we're talking about just an apple. Mm-hmm. We're talking about just a piece of chicken, a vegetable. We're talking about whole foods. Those don't have to be so expensive,
correct.
Right? And so if you can come and do all the testing, do it. If you can't, read about this, study it, and start as soon as you can with the most natural foods and have patience. This is not a one day we're going to do everything perfect. Your kid needs time, but you as a parent, I feel, need to read, get convinced real fast before time flies by on the importance of nutrition. So anyways, this was Second Opinions.